Hello and welcome to this episode of The Rest is Entertainment with me, Marina Hyde.
And me, Richard Osman. Welcome back to the country, Marina.
Thank you so much. Thank you for missing me.
Well, I didn't say that. I just said welcome back to the country.
Didn't go that far.
Yeah, come on.
I missed you.
Yeah, well,
I missed you.
Come on, that's a little bit Rory and Alistair, isn't it? We don't have that level of bromance. But a lovely week you had.
Oh, it's brilliant. Brilliant.
Quickly, before we get onto entertainment,
Yes.
shall I tell you my news?
Yes, please.
We have a kitten. We just got it from the Brighton RSPCA on Saturday. She's called Lottie. I put some stuff up of her on Instagram if you want to take a look. We haven't introduced her yet to Liesl.
I was going to say.
We got that fun ahead of us.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's a beaut. She's a real showboater.
Sings for herself.
Yeah, she really does.
So where's Liesl?
Liesl is in the rest of the house. Lottie is
secluded in the West Wing.
She is essentially in the entertainment complex.
Yeah.
No, she is in a small room where she can feel safe. But honestly, she doesn't need to. She's like, yeah. What else you got?
Yeah.
I'll go outside. I don't care. Yeah. So if you want to see pictures of a lovely Lottie, but that's been my entire weekend. Really was.
Well, that's pretty exciting.
And Monday was all Lottie all the time. Should we start with the MCU and our friend Robert Downey Jr.? You know, our friend Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, I just think he's sort of post-friend, really. I think he's one of those categories of celebrities that's very sort of so removed from normal life. But Marvel had been in the doldrums of late, in that they had sort of two pretty much, well, one underperforming film, Ant-Man, and then The Marvels, which flopped. And everyone was saying, is this the end? Has something gone terribly wrong? And bearing in mind how much of cinema has been given over to this particular genre, is that the end? Does this spell sort of disaster for Hollywood as well? Well, Deadpool and Wolverine came out. Now, it's already the highest rating R or 18 film of all time.
Yeah.
It's the 8th highest movie opening of all time. It came at the same time as Comic-Con, which is the big sort of comic book fan convention. It's San Diego every year. And Kevin Feige, who is the boss of Marvel, always stands up, and they've got this Hall H that they do all their big events in.
Okay.
And it's a sort of cult thing. And they, for a long time, you know, Kevin Feige would just stand up and announce about 15 projects, some of which would happen and some of which are still in development.
Yeah, it would always be like the name of an animal followed by the word man or woman.
And then sometimes they wouldn't even have a sort of like a logo, having done them up already. Like things like Blade, he would just, which still, by the way, we haven't seen, he would just randomly announce at the end. Anyway, this year he announces a load of stuff. And then the Fantastic Four's Fantastic Car sort of flies over and you think, oh my gosh, and then they're actually on stage and you think...
A car flew over?
The Fantastic Car.
The Fantastic Car?
The Fantastic Car, their vehicle from the comic.
Yeah, what is
comic
that,
books. Yeah, just a small little hatchback.
Yeah.
But souped up slightly.
Yeah, also, listen, you can get a lot of luggage in the boot.
You can...
Yeah, so see, if there's 4 of you, honestly, it's useful.
Surprisingly roomy.
Yeah, exactly. They used to have a Citroen, they swapped to the Fantastic Car, and they have not looked back.
So Kevin Feige is standing there and on come all these masked people and they say that the new villain is going to be Doctor Doom. Now, who unmasks himself and is going to be playing Doctor Doom but Robert Downey Jr.? Now, I am going to do a spoiler here. If you don't know that Robert Downey Jr. is Iron Man and he dies in Avengers Endgame, you're like one of the last 3 people on Earth not to know this. So I'm sorry about that.
What? You said what? That's the only one I haven't watched.
Okay. So I'm sorry if I ruined it for you, but he does, and everybody knows this, right? And also there was sort of no feeling that even though, how can you bring him back? You can never bring him back. But they were thinking that in order to make Marvel work again, they somehow have to get the old gang back together, whether or not they do. But the idea that he's now going to play the villain, so this... And not
so
only
who's this
that,
villain?
He's going to be Dr. Doom, Victor Von Doom.
I mean, come
Victor
on.
Van Doom,
Who's
me.
going to a doctor called Dr. Doom?
Dr. Doom. Yeah. I think he's a doctor of letters.
You know, like if you ring your GP, you've got 3 choices. There's Dr. Patel, there is Dr. Robertson, or Dr. Doom also has... you go, I am going to go with Patel or Robertson, I think. There's Dr. Doom sitting there going, why does no one ever like to come to my surgery?
I tell you what, you're going to say any GP appointment you can. So I
That's
think you take Doom, no problem.
Exactly.
If I can get a GP appointment, my God, yes, please. These 2 movies he's going to be the villain in are going to be directed by the Russo brothers. They did 2 of the Captain Americas, but they crucially also did Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, which are obviously the biggest movies.
When you say crucially?
Crucially, they are... So to say Robert Downey Jr. is coming back in movies directed by the Russo brothers, if you're a Marvel fan, it is the biggest thing that they could possibly have announced. it is genuinely pulling about 100 rabbits out of the hat.
It's like for Fulham fans when we heard that Ryan Sessegnon is coming back from Spurs.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Now I'm with you.
Can I put
Just explain it like that?
Perspective? Right.
It's the big guns, the ones that have made them an absolute fortune before and made them a fortune by making great movies. At the absolute
Downey
height
Jr.
of,
has probably taken $600 million out of Marvel, maybe more, $600 million. And they're paying them another huge amount to do this. Why? Well, it's clear that they needed something so enormous to rescue this. Don't forget that this is, however, the most successful run of form ever in Hollywood, ever in the whole history of Hollywood. The most successful entertainment franchise that has ever been created. It's pulled in over $30 billion at the box office. And in 2001, Marvel was sharing a tiny, tiny little office with a company that made kites.
No,
Yes.
really?
Okay, so it is a meteoric rise, and it dominated the whole of
Wow.
entertainment.
Do you reckon the people in charge of the kite company still ring occasionally?
Oh no, they're massive. They're absolutely enormous. They're defence contractor now. They make defence kites, okay, and
Okay,
they
I
laugh
got you.
at $30 billion. One of the things we've always said about Marvel is that the IP is the star, and Robert Downey Jr. is a rare one because he has got a Best Supporting Actor Oscar for Oppenheimer last year.
Yes.
But the Russo brothers, they go off, they make films, they do things for Apple, for Netflix, for Amazon Prime. And they're really they're not that successful. It's interesting. The Rotten Tomatoes score for the Russo brothers for their MCU movies is 89 to 90%.
Okay.
For their non-MCU movies is 39 to 40%.
Wow.
So
What have they done that's not Marvel, the Russo brothers?
They've done a very, very expensive TV series called Citadel that wasn't a particular success. They've done a movie called The Grey Man. They did something with Tom Holland, which was called Cherry, which was basically a flop. The actors are not really the stars. Once people come out of the MCU, their movies are often flops. They may not be able to make it. So it's really the brand that's the star.
It's like the Big Brother house. When people come out, you're like, well, no, I'm not interested. As soon as they're doing the interview with Davina, you go, oh, no, when you were in the house, that was fun.
I was gripped.
Now I recognise you're just some guy from Letchworth.
And now no longer. It's interesting that Robert Downey Jr. would try and do this, I have to say, because I keep wondering why these people do it. I mean, Harrison Ford was up on stage at that same Comic-Con saying, oh, I just wanted a piece of this. And then he also said things like, he's in the new Captain America where Anthony Mackie takes over the role of Captain America and he's playing a president. And he said, everyone looked like they're having fun in the MCU. It's like, maybe. And then he said, I'm sort of doing it for money. Speaking of weapons companies, what does Harrison Ford want any more money for? Is he actually building an independent defense shield for his own house? Because there's no possible way Harrison Ford can need any more money in his life.
Yeah,
what they actually want is relevance. And they think that these are the biggest movies. And I wonder whether that's the case with Robert Downey Jr. because he's never going to be as famous as he is as when he's playing Tony Stark. Or in this, and we'll come to how on earth, he's just been playing Tony Stark, the most famous guy in the canon. How can he now be a villain?
Yes, that's what I wanted to ask you.
Okay, first of all, Marvel is now in its multiverse phase, which, put kindly, it's like shows that there's all different, different realities and different timelines where all different things are possible. Put unkindly, I would just say anything can be anything. It's just a massive hand wave to kind of wave away plot problems or to bring people back from the dead when they're already...
That's so clever. That's like that bit in Terminator when Linda Hamilton's trying to work out the timeline and Arnie goes, listen, but your brain hurts if you think about that too much. That
was clever and ironic then, but now I just feel like it's a way to try and sort of, spew out more money for this franchise. But anyway, there are different ways they could do this. In one of the recent comic book versions of this, Doctor Doom bound a piece of Doctor Strange's soul to himself.
Did he? How did he do that?
Hand wave.
Oh, really?
I don't know which. I don't know which timeline we were in or the sacred timeline. Again,
Can I ask which medical school he went to?
Yeah, was Doctor Strange did go to a medical school.
I would have thought
He's
that
a brilliant
Doctor Strange and Doctor Doom at medical school would have gravitated towards each other because of their surnames.
Oh, I think it would have been a bit like Iceman and Maverick. Are they going to kiss each other or kill each other?
If
it's
they
not
knew
clear.
They were Doom and they would go, oh, I bet you got hell at primary school, didn't you? You've been called Doom, and Strange is like, yeah, same. And suddenly they were mates.
Yeah, but you can be my wingman surgeon anytime. There's a lot of that, I reckon.
You got Doctor Doom. You're like, I'm Doctor Doom. And you look at the other doctor, you think, I hope you've got a proper name, mate. And he goes, I'm Doctor Strange. You think, oh, no. Just have to text your loved ones.
Yeah. Kevin Feige is repeatedly saying, oh, I think, to the fans, we've said that he's died.
Yes.
But, it's not a surprise if you don't lay the ground for him never coming back. And then, oh my God, he comes back.
Yeah.
So really, in a slightly depressing way, anything can be anything. They can do anything they want. They can put it in a different timeline. And Kevin Feige will think, I know exactly what the fans can swallow. And if they want it and the fans will swallow it, then why can't we do it?
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? Because where's the jeopardy then? If nothing has any consequence.
Nothing really. There are no stakes because no one can really die in lots of these things.
Yeah.
And I find that quite sort of
also worth remembering it's fictional.
Yeah.
So where are the stakes? No, but where are the narrative stakes?
The narrative stakes are not enormous, I would say, even though the fate of the entire world is always the stakes, supposedly, in every film. But I don't think the narrative stakes are enormous. And in terms of genre, the idea that they have all these different genres and that we're going to do this as a political thriller, this is a legal drama. No, you have the superhero genre. Yeah. Everything is a superhero genre. And one of the things Robert Downey Jr. said on stage at Comic-Con was, what can I say? I like playing complicated characters. And I have to say that we like our complicated characters simple in the MCU. It's like, oh, what? Tony Stark, he's really selfish, but he also makes a really noble sacrifice.
Occasionally.
He's libertarian, he's a bit of a dickhead, but he also wants to save the world. I mean, it's that kind of complicated. So I'm sure his Doctor Doom will be a same version of that kind of complicated.
Robert Downey Jr. must be the greatest comeback story in the history of Hollywood, from where he was to where he ended up. He went to prison for a year. He was found with guns and crack in his car. He was persona non grata. He came out. There was he had a slight comeback, and it was Animobile and things like that. But then he found with drugs again, and now the best paid actor in Hollywood.
And that's all because of Marvel, and because they took a shot and they said they really wanted him to be Iron Man. And bear in mind that Marvel was nothing before Iron Man came out at all in terms of a film franchise.
I heard that they used to share an office with a kite company.
Yeah, I mean, can you believe it?
I don't know where I heard that.
Can you believe it? But they were nothing then. And to say, oh yeah, we want to bet the farm, our very small kite flying farm, on a guy we're going to have to drug test every day and all these sort of things. One of the things in his new Marvel deal, which was actually something I already knew he had, but now this has become clear in this latest Marvel deal, part of his contract is he gets a trailer encampment. Actual word. So his trailer is not on the set, okay? There's a whole separate area where he has a whole bunch of trailers, some multi-story trailers, and he is driven there in all his breaks, and he's completely separate from everyone else. He can't have that anywhere else. He can have that in the MCU. He's got his trailer's on a different timeline to anyone else's on the set.
What do you think he has in his trailer encampment?
I think he has, various on-call chefs. He'll have his own private gym. Yeah. He will have a sort of post where he can survey the rest of the set, probably with a set of binoculars, and think, God, look at them having a terrible time having to eat.
Podcast studio.
Yeah, I mean, the
escape room.
Yeah. Yeah, the fun stuff, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Table tennis, probably a table football. Anyway, we don't know what he has, but no, we do know some of it. Some of those things he does have. So he's guaranteed that. He's also guaranteed an unbelievable amount, sort of things like back end and points and all this. The Russo brothers themselves, who are coming back, they get incentives, reward incentives that kick in when the movie passes $700 million and $1 billion, which, by the way, these will definitely pass. So you can see why they're all doing it, and it makes sense. Creatively, is it fascinating? I don't think that they're creatively fascinating anyway as movies. But another thing I would say about this is that Hollywood hasn't really got any other ideas. As I said, these are so unbelievably successful. They were like an overperforming hedge fund. They were like Madoff, really, except without a kind of creepy 17th floor where all the Ponzi scheme is being run out of. They were like this unbelievably guaranteed way of making money. And everyone tried to switch to them. Universal tried to and failed to create their own sort of dark universe, which didn't work. But over at DC, which is owned by Warner's, you've got James Gunn, who directed Guardians of the Galaxy. He's been hired by them to create a sort of rival universe with their properties, Superman, Batman, all of those ones. The first film of his hasn't even come out yet. So they've all the studios try to pivot to this type of movie making. And if it doesn't work anymore, what do you do now? So it's a huge relief that Deadpool and Wolverine has done so completely well. And that when they bought Fox, they got certain other properties back into the fold, which were the X-Men.
Yes.
That's why they can do Wolverine. And they bought the Fantastic Four. So
Yes.
these are some new people.
The guys with the Fiat.
The guys with the Fiat.
Yeah.
The guys with the Fantastic
The Fiat kids.
Fantastica.
Yeah.
And they brought them in. And so now they can do more and they can do the crossover things for which they become very famous. And there maybe is a way out. Reports of the death are very exaggerated, which is good news for lots of things.
See, that's one of the very interesting things about it is, as you said right at the beginning, literally one of the most successful, if not the most successful endeavors in the history of Hollywood. This is the building of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, you might argue the Star Wars universe, but this is, I mean, I suspect this is really even more.
Yes, even more so.
And even this gets to the point where everyone goes, they've lost it. Oh, my God, they're so useless. They can't even run this properly.
Yeah.
And what a flop. And you think, my God, it's impossible to end a career in success, isn't it?
It's absolutely. They all end in failure.
Yeah.
But I think their failure will be staved off for a while yet. And also, there are no really other ideas how to fill multiplexes.
This episode is brought to you by Sky.
Now, Richard, you have a brother.
I do.
The wonderful Matt Osman from Suede.
Why do you ask?
Would you describe yourselves as close?
Yes, different industries, but yeah, we love each other.
You sound closer than the two brothers in the new Sky original, Mr Bigstuff. Stars Danny Dyer as Lee,
please.
an alpha male with a prescription drug addiction, as well as a biscuit tin full of their dad's ashes. Also,
Okay.
yes, please. And Ryan Sampson as Glenn, a nervy perfectionist and carpet salesman striving to live the suburban ideal with his fiancée. Glenn's life is very peaceful and exactly how he likes it until his brother comes crashing into their lives, and it's not long before their perfect lives start to unravel faster than the weave of a cheap carpet. Ryan Sampson also wrote the series. He's an absolutely fantastic comic actor. He was in Plebs and, of course, Brassic, another Sky comedy.
All episodes available to watch now, only on Sky.
I think we're going to talk now about the Edinburgh Fringe.
We are. We're going to talk about stand-up comedy because the Edinburgh Fringe Festival is on right now. It's in Edinburgh. It's a whole month of stand-up shows, theatre, works in progress, lots of amazing things up there. If you've not been, it's very well worth going. But it made me start thinking about the comedy industry as it stands at the moment because it's very emblematic of that. Edinburgh always used to be, this is the place you go to be discovered. So this is the place where you go unknown and you leave a superstar. I remember going in the early 90s. I've been going to the Edinburgh Festival for, 30-odd years now, more than that. And the early 90s, I remember going up there and David Walliams and Matt Lucas had a show, Armstrong and Miller, Mighty Boosh, League of Gentlemen. They were all in smallish venues and they all sort of really, really cracked it that year. People would come up and see these shows, have meetings with these people in London, put them on television, and then they become superstars. Yeah. And that's what Edinburgh was.
I'm from university. I went twice and did the Oxford Review and performed for 2 years.
Yeah. Did you perform?
Yes.
Wow. Like sketches and things?
Yeah.
Did you have to do any voices?
I had to do a lot of voices. And, you get reviewed by people, and we had reviews of our shows, and it was really sort of... But there were big comedy producers, people like Avalon up there, and everyone was trying to get spotted and noticed. And it has always been that springboard. And then, obviously, in later years, you've had things like Baby Reindeer or Fleabag or Nanette that start off as Edinburgh shows that become...
Taskmaster started off as an Edinburgh show. So, it's always been the place that you would go to be found. And therefore, actually, it's become quite expensive as a comic to go up there because the rewards are so big that you are willing to spend a lot of money to play in a very small venue and not take a huge amount of the cut of the gate and, put yourself through that and get yourself into debt because the upside was absolutely massive. Now, the interesting thing more recently is that industry of going to Edinburgh, being found by television and then making your money has collapsed. And when I mean collapsed, it is non-existent. I mean, it doesn't exist anymore. Just about pre-pandemic, we saw the very end of it. I'm going to say the last comic to now be big on television, the last Indiana Jones to sort of roll under the door as it was closing was Maisie Adam. So Maisie is on loads of shows and she's brilliant. Since then, the television industry, television comedy entertainment industry has completely disappeared. There is now no conveyor belt. You can't go from Edinburgh. If you used to be in Edinburgh, you would have meetings with 10, 20, 30 development producers straight afterwards because there were lots of independent production companies. They were all developing shows. They were all doing pilots. Some of those pilots would be made into series. They all needed comedians to be in that. The smaller the pilot, the newer the comedian you needed. So you were always looking for somebody who you knew you could book, but who was brilliant and no one else had found yet. And it was just the age-old story. So many of our comics, so many of our big stand-ups, in that place I've seen Romesh in a tiny little room,
Yeah.
you know, Josh Widdicombe in a tiny room, you know, just all the big names of now. If I go way back to my first ever festival, I was seeing Alan Davis in a tiny room, who, by the way, I think did probably the best hour of stand-up I've ever seen in my entire
Wow.
life, which back in the mid-'80s that was. But that was the place.
And
you
there
got
was
found.
and you met people who helped you in your career.
Yeah.
I always thought. I remember doing weird things. I remember going. Simon Munnery, who had this character called the League Against Tedium, which is an incredible, and he used to run this thing called Club Zarathustra. I remember me and Sally Phillips going on like for a couple of nights in that show and doing weird. But then you met all these other comedians and they pulled you up and they helped you, and it was really good for that, for the sort of cross pollination of all those sort of things.
Yeah, it's been an extraordinary breeding ground of gossip and all sorts of things going on, and an amazing place for comedians. Now, as I say, that's why it became rather expensive, because the venues in Edinburgh, by and large, will take 60-40 of the ticket price. Rents have gone up and up and up and up as the Fringe has got bigger and bigger and bigger. The costs of brochures and advertising, all that stuff. So everything got very, very expensive. Now, you come back from the pandemic and the television comedy entertainment industry has disappeared. It's genuinely disappeared. All of those panel shows, like millions of them, they are all gone. And the people at those production companies who were in development, they have all gone. But the Edinburgh Festival has not caught up with that at all. So the Edinburgh Festival is still incredibly expensive, but it is not a springboard to anything.
And when we say incredibly expensive, like just for the month, it's costing people sometimes 12 grand. It can go up to over 20, depending on how big your little company of what you're doing is.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got to, accommodation is killing people.
As a comic in the old days, you could swallow that, just about for a year. And certainly the big agents would pay for you to be there.
Yeah.
What's happened, which is absolutely fascinating, I think, I'll preface this by saying there is not a crisis in the comedy industry. There's definitely a crisis in the comedy television industry. That has gone. The comedy industry is absolutely booming. I mean, it's insanely lucrative. If you're a comic and you can tour, you're going to make an awful lot of money, like a huge amount of money, because your costs are not particularly high. People love going to see comedy. If you put on a decent show, you're getting 80-20 probably of the ticket price, maybe 70-30. So if you can do a 100-date tour, 200-date tour to decent numbers, you are making an absolute fortune. So the money is absolutely there. But Edinburgh does not help you with that in any way whatsoever. There is one thing that helps you with that, and this is the biggest thing that's changed in the last, maybe it's only sort of 3 years or so really in comedy, is comics, every single time they do a club gig, they film themselves with 4 GoPros and they do crowd work for the first 10, 15 minutes. And crowd work is when you're talking to the person on the front row and saying, where are you from, mate? What do you do for a living? And then you sort of roast them and have a laugh with them. So you film that every single night, and then you cut that up into 1-minute clips and you put it on TikTok and you put it on Instagram. And that industry is enormous. The reason they do it with the crowd work is, by and large, if you're a comic, you write a set. And it's quite hard to write a set. Yeah. And you don't really want to give that away too much. You don't want to give away your set. Whereas if you're just talking to people at the front of the audience, that's free, because it's different every single night. Now, it didn't start with this guy, but the reason that everybody does this now is this guy, Paul Smith. Yeah. Are you aware of Paul Smith's work? So Paul Smith, I don't recall him being on television. He's not someone who's been on, Would I Lie to You or Taskmaster or anything like that. He's a Liverpudlian comic, Paul Smith. And he started doing this sort of thing in 2010. He was connected with a company called Hot Water in Liverpool, Hot Water Comedy Club, who are clearly very, very forward-thinking. Who've now got what they say is the biggest comedy club in the world. Then they worked out there was one in San Francisco that was bigger. So it's the biggest comedy club in Europe, up in Liverpool. But they said to Paul Smith in 2010, they said, just put some of your crowd work on, just put clips of it, mate. And Paul Smith said, come on. I mean, who's going to watch that? And they said, just do it. And he did. He is now pretty much the biggest touring comedian in Britain. He is doing like a 200-date tour. He's doing the Wembley Arena. He did a 12,000 person gig up in Liverpool. One of his most recent videos on Instagram is him buying a Bentley Continental, right? So there is money in comedy, and Paul Smith is making an awful lot of it. And he did it by building up his own fan base and by putting stuff online and on socials. And that is what every single big new comic is doing that. It's doing now. You're not getting big through Edinburgh. You're getting big through YouTube. You're getting big through podcasts as well. And you're getting big through TikTok. And
I mean, it's interesting. This year's festival was launched. Edinburgh Fringe Festival was launched in the TikTok headquarters.
oh, was it?
I mean, talk about assimilation complete. And there was a whole sort of thing for a long time about people saying, oh, you know, yeah, you can make it on social media, but can you be, you know, what's it like doing it live?
Yeah.
You know, people who only did it live or whatever would say, yeah, you're going to find a whole different thing now with an audience. And the fact is that it doesn't really matter because, as you say, that aspect of things is...
Yes, you know, when people say, oh, yeah, but would it work on TV? And you think, well, if you're Paul Smith, if you're virtually anyone now, you think, well, it doesn't need to. I mean, why would I? I mean, literally, the money you can make in touring and comedy is huge. I mean, TV, even in the good old days of TV money, it's nothing compared to touring money. Touring money is the, you know, it's
short of a Netflix special, which is you do quite well at.
Yes, you can do quite well at that. But if you take Paul Smith, for example, and I'm not saying this is him, but if you do a 200-date tour, say, and lots of these big comics do 200-date tours, and that includes all the legacy comics, you know, the people who did start on TV, the Dara O'Briens and people like that. If you're doing 200-date tour, you're doing maybe 1,000 people a night, and you've got an 80-20 split on the box office, and 35 quid a ticket, say that, then your tour just grossed £5.5 million, right? Yeah. And what are your overheads there, by the way, apart from a rail rover?
Yeah.
You know, it's sort of nothing. You know, it's like you're not a band. You're not someone having to do this incredible stage show. You're not someone having to have lights and lasers. You know, it's a really funny person standing up there connecting with an audience night after night. And it doesn't cost very much, is the truth. And so I personally think we'll get onto the Edinburgh Festival and what happens to that next in a bit, because I do think that's interesting. You know, anyone who runs a comedy club says, I'll have 4 comics on a night. They all set up their own cameras. Every single one of them does crowd work. So they're all talking to the same people in the front row. They're all doing the same thing, like night after night after night. So that has to that does have to change. But it's clearly worked for an awful lot of people. You go on YouTube and put, you know, comedian, you know, puts down heckler or best heckler. I mean, there's a million of these things. But I do think there's something very democratic about it. I'm going to take one example. There's a guy called Vittorio Angeloni, who I went to see at Edinburgh 2 years ago, I think. So Vittorio had a really good Edinburgh. He's an Irish stand-up, very funny, mainstream. You can stick him on telly tomorrow. Of course, you can't stick him on telly tomorrow anymore because there is no more telly, right? It's gone. And every single place is filled by legacy comedy acts. So Vittorio, you think, well, what can you do with Vittorio? But he and Mike Rice have a huge podcast now. Yeah. And he has loads of YouTube clips. And Vittorio can now tour. And he didn't need television. He didn't need any of that stuff. He didn't need all of these people who, anytime someone is young and talented, who absolutely just swoop on that person. And if you have YouTube and if you have podcasts, the really interesting thing that happens is you cut out so many middlemen. And the reason so many comics do podcasts and the reason so many of them do their own stuff on YouTube is you remove every single barrier between you and the advertiser, which is where people are getting paid when they do anything sort of on television. You know, a channel has gone. You know, you don't have a channel, you don't have a production company, you don't have any of that stuff. The money runs straight to you, and you can do the act that you want to do. You can do the work that you want to do. You find out very quickly who your audience is, what your audience likes, what it is they like about you, stuff that you can push them in this direction and that direction. So I think creatively it's a very, very interesting thing.
People always say that the smaller the screen that you work on, the better your prospects currently are in entertainment. So if you do something that can be seen on a phone, you're doing well. If you're working largely in the theatrical exhibition window, you're in a bit of you're having a few problems.
Yeah, it's exactly it. And there are so many examples of people. Adam Rowe does the Have a Word podcast with Dan Nightingale, George Lewis doing a big tour now. All these people who have had absolutely no TV exposure, really. But of course, they have had TV exposure, because what does TV mean now? It means a screen. No. It means you looking at some clips of somebody. And I find that very interesting. Okay, so 2 things. So Edinburgh, what happens to Edinburgh? Well, I was talking to David O'Doherty about it, who still does Edinburgh every year. He says, but look, it's soon just going to become, you know, what you would call legacy acts, which is comics from years ago. And he says, and of course I'm going to come to Edinburgh every year, so I love it. He says it's just great. And David O'Doherty, he's sold out every single show he's done at Edinburgh for 10 years in a big venue. So he's not someone who would worry about the economics of it, but of course he worries about it, about other people, because he's an incredibly big supporter of younger comics. And he said, look, Edinburgh have to work out a way to make it worth the while of a 23-year-old, 24-year-old, 25-year-old to come to Edinburgh and do their first show, because at the moment there is nothing. If you're not going to get found, if you're not going to be launched onto a big screen and then launched into a tour, why are you coming to do Edinburgh? You wouldn't sit at home and do some stuff, play your local club and film it. That's the thing you would do, because what DOD says, and various other people I've spoken to, Matt Crosby from Pappy's said the prices of taking a show to Edinburgh have remained the same as when the rewards were massive.
Well, I think actually they've got higher because of things like Airbnb, which have
a lot of the
surge pricing on the old rentals.
Yeah,
and I think they've got a lot higher than they used to be when, even obviously when I was going, which is a long time ago, not attending, but when I was performing, it was you could easily rent a place that wasn't a million miles away from the centre.
And certainly those agents who used to take clients up and pay for them are no longer doing that, because why would you? If you've got 12 grand to spend on a client, you stick it all into the social media strategy. I mean, why wouldn't you?
I was speaking to someone this week, and they said that all of them now on their flyers, which everyone still bizarrely hands out flyers to try and get people into their shows, and they all have their TikTok follow accounts on them. Actually on the flyers, because why, you're saying this is why I should be watched because of this other thing. Now, can I just say one thing? It just encountered something you said earlier. I do agree that it's a meritocracy, and obviously TikTok and Edinburgh of old used to say the same thing, which was that if you can scrape it together, then anyone can come, and we surface anyone. There's no real barrier here, although there was obviously a barrier in terms of cost of performing at Edinburgh. But they all saying we're putting amateurs out there. I would say that TikTok, in the way that tech companies do, has disrupted that completely. But I do think that it leads to a certain flattening of the market, because the creative market to some extent, because there are people who do odd shows and there are odd comics that don't clip well, and they don't, or they do improv, and that doesn't necessarily respond well to short form video. And not everything is well served by short form video and it creatively. And if you're saying the things that work, or whatever, crowd work, whatever, actually, I actually think that it's limiting creative, it narrows the creative spectrum, because the things that work on TikTok are less diverse than the things that work on Edinburgh stages.
Yes, I agree entirely. All I mean about TikTok is that's now the way to go from a small comic to an arena comic. And it used to be television. And television also, by the way, is quite reductive. And, there's certain things that work and certain things that don't work. And so what Edinburgh needs to become again is the home for those quirky, unusual things, which actually where extraordinary stuff comes from.
The League of Gentlemen, I remember seeing are so, they were so weird, and we all saw like really odd stuff there.
Harry Hill stuff where you would never think for a second, oh, this is going to be one of the biggest acts in the country. And that's what Edinburgh needs to be. That has to have a home. But for that to work, Edinburgh's got to work out that it no longer has this premium. It can no longer charge this premium because it is no longer delivering what it used to deliver, which is
TikTok
this
are paying
shop front.
now this year. They're paying for lots of acts to go there. And that reminds me of lots of these tech companies that do a little bit of bricks and mortar, as it were, like in the way that sort of Netflix want to have some cinemas or whatever open, because then they can show their films in and then they might be eligible for awards. TikTok want to say, oh, we're going to pay for some people to go. But really they've subsumed it all. And that's why they have the launch of the Fringe in TikTok's headquarters.
Yeah, listen, there's great green shoots at the Fringe. Monkey Barrel, which is one of the festivals, is much better for comics. The Free Fringe, which basically you just rock up and see a show in lots of different venues and you put money in a bucket afterwards. So there's ways and means of making that experience cheaper, but that needs to become what the Fringe is, essentially, because as you say, we need somewhere for those people who don't want to stick a GoPro at a club gig and film them talking to the front row of the audience. I love that people do that and have managed to leverage that into a big career. I genuinely think that's great. But for comedy to really grow, we need something like that, because it is not going to grow on television anymore. If I can finish by talking about this idea of, if you're a comic, then, oh God, there used to be all these producers used to come up and see us and it used to be great. And, you'd be taken for lunches in London, you'd do a pilot and stuff like that. Behind that is an enormous industry which has collapsed completely. And it's an industry where I know an awful lot of people, which is this world of comedy entertainment. There's still some of it, but there is a fifth maybe of what they used to be. the commissioning of those shows has stopped because the economics of it don't work. Certainly satirical ones, the economics don't work because, you can't leave them on a platform for years and years and years. So the only ones left are the legacy shows, the ones that still do too well that you can't actually get rid of them. Have I got news for you? Would I lie to you? Things like that. They are the only thing that's left, and all the new ones are absolutely gone. If you want to do a television show, if you want to make Mock the Week, for example, and by the way, this is not overcrewed in any way whatsoever. Every single TV show is made by the minimum amount of people.
Yes.
Always has been, always will be. But if you're making Mock the Week, you've got 5 runners, you've got 5 researchers probably, you've got 2 APs, which is assistant producer, which is somewhere in between, when people have been a researcher aren't quite ready to be a producer. You've got a producer, you've got a couple of exec producers, you have got in the studio, you've got 6 camera operators, you've got a gallery full of lighting, gallery full of sound, you've got makeup, you've got wardrobe.
You've got a studio.
Yeah, you've got a studio. You've got 80 people probably that you are giving a job to for 3 months. So to make this thing, Mock the Week, which is, a simple half-hour bit of entertainment with new, youngish comics on it, it's employing 80 people for 3 months. And it is no longer doing that. And that is 80 people who don't have work for 3 months. And I can count on the fingers of one hand now the amount of production companies that still have big development departments and who are making comedy pilots, because the world and the economics of it have changed, and because comics can find the exact same exposure for far less hassle and far less money by doing podcasts. They can find exactly the same amount of exposure for far less money, far less trouble, putting clips on TikTok and YouTube. So the world of television, that's one of the first bits that's been completely hollowed out.
And the immediacy of it, which is what people expect nowadays, is that, on things like satire, I mean, it's kind of amazing that they managed to get Mock the Week out in a week.
Yeah.
But you can have a funny idea in the morning and have it going viral by lunchtime if you're one of related to a piece of the news that people are obsessed about at that particular moment.
Yeah.
And so it's that kind of instant consumption that certainly in terms of satire, you're thinking, wait, I'm doing a show, you're doing a show that is 18 months in development and it's satirizing what now?
And an awful lot of comics, their big skill is speed of thought. That's the thing that they love. And if you have speed of thought, you want the minimum distance between you and an audience.
Yeah.
Right. You want the idea, and then you want the audience to hear that idea. And that's the absolute ideal. And a podcast is perfect for that. If you're suddenly having to go to a studio and you have hair and makeup and there's 8 other people who are all trying to get stuff in as well, I mean, it's, why would you do it? So I will say that industry is really gone. And that industry, the comedy entertainment, I'm going to say some of the most talented people I've ever worked with work in that business. Funnier than most on-screen people. They just don't have the ego where they want to be on screen. A lot of the writers for those shows are just the funniest people you will ever meet in your entire life. A lot of the producers are as well. A lot of the APs. I mean, there's funny, talented people. So if you're in any other industry, if you're high up in any other industry, whether that's marketing or if you're a big company or if you're anyone that wants content, anyone that wants ideas,
which is everybody now.
Which is everybody. If you're looking for that, then there is a huge amount of people out there. You have to pay them very, very well because they're brilliant. You've got really, really good people who can come into your business and bring you an experience and bring you skills and bring you ideas, which you're not going to get from some of the people who are working for you at the moment. I would say if you are anybody looking to really kind of hypercharge a brand or hypercharge an act or whatever it is, anything that needs marketing, anything that needs to build an audience, there is a group of people at the moment who are struggling for work, and find them and give them work, because you will not regret it, because they are so brilliant, and the industry they've worked in for ages has disappeared, but the skills that they have not disappeared, and the talent they have has not disappeared. So there is a huge opportunity. If you want brilliant people, brilliant writers, brilliant producers, brilliant ideas people, there's a lot of them out there at the moment. Any recommendations?
I've been in a place with absolutely no Wi-Fi, which only had DVDs.
And
what do you want me to
recommend
recommend? The Jason Bourne trilogy?
Yes.
Just rewatch them all. Bad Boys 1 and 2.
Excellent.
2 is better than 1. So sorry about that, but not this week.
I will recommend the Rebus series on iPlayer then, which I think is great. It's taken from Ian Rankin's books. They take quite a lot of liberties with his characters, and I don't entirely know what he feels about that, but I know he's an exec producer on it. But it's really good. It's really well written. It's really well put together. It's very, very Scottish in a great way. And I absolutely loved it. 6-parter on iPlayer, the new Rebus. Should we reconvene on Thursday for a question and answers?
Please do join us. The address for questions is therestisentertainment@gmail.com.
And we will see you then.
See you then. Bye-bye.